Welcome everybody to the HR Exchange. Today we are talking about microaggressions in the workplace. So it's a bit of a new topic for us to cover on the HR Exchange. I don't believe it's one that we have covered previously. So hopefully lots of new and exciting content for you. My name is Lindsay Gamester. I'm an employment solicitor, also director and head of employment here at Bhayani Law. I am joined today by my colleague Ellie Hand, who is a senior HR advisor, but also our training lead. And I'm also really excited to introduce you all to Alex Hayward, who is a new employment solicitor who's joined us. I say new, she's not new to the job, highly experienced, but we're really excited to have a part of our team. Yeah, it just means now we can offer more exciting opportunities going forward. So let's look at making a start. I will just let everyone know that today's session is being recorded. We will be making use of our chat box. So if you have any questions as we're going along, please do put a question in there. Ellie will be watching the chat box to make sure that we can pick up any questions as we go along. If it's a nice juicy one, we might save it to the end to have a discussion about that. Apologies as well. I've missed someone really important. Also, we've got Jay on today as well. So Jay Bhayani. She's also here, and you know, they may want to add some of her insight as well as we go along. So as I said, we're recording. Everyone always asks, will the slides be available afterwards? Yes, they will. We tend to send out a feedback questionnaire, and on there, there'll be an option for you to request the slides. If you select yes, we'll send you a copy. Also, a recording of this will be put on our website within a few days. So if you do miss anything, or you have colleagues who you think, right, they really need to watch this and catch up, then they'll be able to log on to our website and see that content. So anyone who is not familiar with us, so we're Bhayani HR and Employment Law. We are a specialist solicitors firm, and we just focus on all your employment, HR and business needs. So on the screen, you'll see a list of everything that we do. So I won't go into too much detail on that because actually we've got some, well, first of all, let's just show you the awards. We're always really proud of these. Obviously, we've worked really hard over the years and we have accumulated some awards, particularly the ones that, the most recent ones, we're now Highfield accredited for training, which is a really exciting addition to our, like I say, our collection. But yeah, looking a little bit more about what we do, obviously one of our main focuses is HR. So we support you in your employee journey, right from recruitment all the way around to compliance, culture, live issues. You'll see all the issues that we can assist you with on our wheel. If you are one of our watertight clients, we delve further. So as part of your watertight package, we address all of these issues with you. Our approach to HR is proactive. We can do the firefighting. You can phone us and you can say this has happened, that's happened. We can help you with those immediate issues. But for us, the value in HR is making sure that you are being proactive. You're looking at upcoming issues, and therefore we can then hopefully make sure that you don't run into too many problems along the way and you have a happy and healthy workforce. Not only do we support the employee journey, we are now offering a much more expanded business support offering as well. So there's as well as the employment team, we have a commercial solicitor who works with us, and we can now help you with all these different areas too. We do offer a free review. So all that entails is you sitting down with one of us, most likely over Teams, and we'll just go through these areas and tick box, make sure that you've got everything covered off. A bit of general advice if anything's missing, what we think you should be adding, and then we can work with you to really strengthen your business structure as well. So if you have, if you are looking at buying businesses, if you're being bought, 2P, GDPR, it's still around, unfortunately, still very much there, and it's still something that we need to keep reviewing. Any of those types of issues we can help you with as well. So what we're going to cover today then in our session. So today, firstly, we're going to do an overview of general discrimination law and protected characteristics. Never hurts to scrub up on the basics, because they're our foundations. When we're talking about microaggressions, banter, all those things, that it all comes back to discrimination. So we are going to look at banter, just because there is a big overlap between banter and microaggressions. Then we're going to look at, well, what is a microaggression? Where has this new term come from? What does it all mean? How that all interlinks with discrimination, and then particularly how that's going to affect your business and what you can do to address it if it's having a negative effect on your business. So I'm going to set you all a task though. Obviously we are going to discuss in more detail what these things are, but in the chat box, I'm inviting you all to share with me any experiences that you've got of banter and microaggressions. It could be ones that you've come across whilst in your workplace, you've heard about. It could be current issues that you're dealing with, or just something that you want us to talk about and bring up, because later on in the session we're going to basically share some experiences. We're going to share with you some of the things that we've come across whilst we've been delivering our training and also advising our clients, but it'd be great to hear from yourselves as well as to what the difficulties you've been coming up with or coming up against when it comes to banter and microaggressions. This is a safe space. There is no judgment, but I will remind you again, it's being recorded. So it's up to you how much you want to share. But we really value your input into these sessions, just to make sure you're getting the most out of it. But also, we might be able to give you a little bit of advice as well. And it's nice to know also that other people are going through the same thing as you. So, discrimination in the workplace then. Let's start by covering some of our basics. So, definitions. We've now got an expanding range of definitions, but initially we'll start with equality. And obviously equality is treating everyone the same. We're not discriminating because of any characteristics. But then we've expanded, because now actually we also need diversity. So it's not just about treating everyone the same, it's making sure that our workforce is diverse. We're bringing people in from different backgrounds. Inclusion. Not only are we bringing people in from different backgrounds, styles, perspective, values, we are including them in our workspace. We are ensuring that our workspace is a safe place for everyone. Everyone feels like they should be part of your working environments, and they're not facing unnecessary obstacles when working for you. So, but then we've got a new one. So our newest definition, which some of you may have come across, is equity. And I've had quite a few people ask me, well, what's the difference between equality and equity? Surely it's exactly the same. Why have we now got equity involved? So I can describe to you what equity is, and there's a definition there, refers to fairness, justice, making sure that everyone not only has the same opportunities, but we address balances. But I think that picture says it all. So if you look at the picture for equality there, it shows that we have given everyone the same size box to stand on to watch this football match. So that's fair. We have treated everyone fairly, everyone's got the same. But in reality, that doesn't mean everyone ends up with the same opportunities. So as you can see, the person who's tallest, he can see fine. Then we've got a little girl there who's struggling to see over because actually that box isn't quite big enough. And then we've got someone in a wheelchair that actually can't use that box. So equity is about not only making sure everyone has the same opportunities, it's about making sure that you put in place those adjustments so everyone is on a level playing field. So everyone can see, everyone can take part in the game. And if we liken the game to your workplace, everyone can come and work at your workplace, contribute evenly, ultimately, make money for your business. Everyone can do the same thing. That is obviously the ideal world, but all that now ties into equality, diversity, inclusion, equity. We need to be considering everything. And that's still what is governed all by the Equality Act 2010. So many of you will know that, but previously we had different pieces of legislation. There was race relations, disability discrimination. We now just have this one act. And it's getting on a bit now. 2010. A lot of time has passed since that was put in place. So it's standing. Well, we're now seeing basically just how flexible the Equality Act is, and so far it is holding up. It's needing some tweaking because things are changing, but this is what we've got at the moment, and so far we are seeing that it's able to adapt to the new situations that are being thrown at employers and employees. Right. So who does it apply to? It applies to all employees. It doesn't matter what level. You could be a director of your business, right down to a cleaner. It does not matter. Discrimination legislation is for everyone. Also include your job applicants, temporary seasonal workers, agency workers, self-employed contractors, EU migrants, foreign nationals, anyone who steps through your door, essentially. So we're not differentiating. No one is excluded when it comes to the Equality Act. Now, when does it apply? There is no qualification period, and this sometimes trips up employers because some are very used to hearing, well, they've got employees have limited rights in the first 2 years. If you're not aware, you need 2 years continuous service before you can bring a claim for unfair dismissal, and sometimes we get that a little bit mixed up with discrimination, thinking, well, they haven't been with us 2 years. So we don't have to worry about that. Yes, you do. And as I said, it even applies to your job applicant. So you don't even have to employ someone to be bound by the Equality Act. And to just give you a very recent example of some litigation that I've just done, and we completed and we won, and that was an applicant who brought a claim against a company for disability discrimination mainly. He threw in their age discrimination. I think we had sex discrimination on the grounds of race as well, basically saying that he didn't get offered a job interview because he disclosed his disability, he was male, he was in his 50s, and he had an accent that denoted that he was from somewhere else. I believe he may have been from Ireland or Northern Ireland. So he brought all these rafter claims against our client, who all they'd done is looked at his CV and gone, no, he's not quite right for us, so we won't interview. And that led into, this happened in 2020 or 2021. We've been at this 2 years defending it, and we've only got our judgment this year, and we've got the right outcome for our client. But it's just a clear message to everyone, particularly if you're an employer, that you have to be aware about equality, diversity, all these issues we're going to discuss today, because ultimately you could end up in a tribunal. Right, a little bit of fun now. So last time I did a Slido quiz and it went down really well. So I'm going to encourage you again to see if you want to take part. So the way you take part in our quiz is if you can get your smartphones and you scan the QR code there, it will take you to a page on your phone. You shouldn't have to sign up for anything. It shouldn't need login details. It should just take you to a page called Slido. And that will be the start of our quiz. So I'll let everyone just scan that. If you don't have a smartphone available, you can kind of still take part in your own. Just take notes as you go. Right, and so everyone should now be joining our quiz. Everyone, yep, we've got some people signing up. If you don't want to put your real name, you don't have to. I don't mind what you put as long as it's not offensive. But it'd be great to see as many of you joining as possible, just because it's just a little bit fun. It's interactive. So I'll give you a little bit more time to get on. We've got 12 on so far. Oh, it's going up. Also, at the end, there is a scoring thing, but we're ignoring that. We're not doing this for scores. It's not about who scores the most. It is, as I said, just a little bit of fun to make this more interactive for you guys as well. Right. Oh, great. Got 17 on now. We are nearly there. Right, that might be about it. Excuse me. Right. So on your phones now, you're going to see a question pop up. And the question is, which ones are protected characteristics? And here you'll see a big list. And I want you to select as many as you believe are protected characteristics. Excuse me. So I'm not going to tell you how many answers are right. I want you to look at it and I want you to decide how many of these and which ones are protected characteristics. There's also still time for you to join by using that QR code as well, just on the side, if you do want to take part. So you should all be going through and selecting the protected characteristics on your phone. So we've got 13, 14. There's 3 more of you are currently undecided. 2 more. Right. So let's see if we've got that right. Right then. So answers. We have got, everyone thinks disability is correct. We've got something that tattoos modifications are could come under protected characteristics. Pregnancy and maternity is one of the answers. Hygiene. No one's buying hygiene as a protected characteristic, and neither are they buying obesity. But the rest, some of those we're still a bit unsure about. So let's have a look. So the answers are age, sex, race, religion, disability, gender reassignment, sexual orientation, marriage, civil partnership, pregnancy, and maternity. They haven't changed. We started with 9, we've kept 9. So that's all we've got. But what we have seen recently is that these categories are being expanded and tested. So I'd say probably the ones that you've seen in the media that are that have attracted attention would be veganism. So veganism now isn't a standalone protected characteristic. It actually falls under religion and beliefs. But again, what the tribunals are doing is looking at those individual cases to see whether it fits into this scope. And with veganism, they did find that it would fall under a protected characteristic, but to be protected as a vegan, you basically have to practice that belief to the most extreme levels. So in that case, this was a person who wouldn't use public transport, wouldn't wear leather. His life was completely revolved around his belief in veganism. So that did fall under. Whereas you compare that to my sister-in-law, who is a vegan, she does preach a little bit to me about it. However, when I offered her a pair of leather Doc Martens, not the vegan ones, she was quite happy to accept those. So her belief is probably unlikely to be protected compared to the gentlemen who wouldn't have worn those Doc Martens, although they do a vegan range, she will still, she drives around in her car and does all those things. So it's looking at the individual examples. One of the more exciting developments that we're actually seeing play out in the tribunals this week is that in Leicester, there is it's something like a 2-week hearing is going on about the menopause. So already it's been accepted that menopause could be a disability. And there, as I said, there's a very lengthy tribunal claim now happening as we speak to find out whether a lady who was suffering from symptoms of the menopause had been discriminated against. So next time I see you all, hopefully I'll be able to give you an update on what happened in that one. But as you can see, we're seeing these categories expand, not but we're not adding to them at the moment. So another little quiz for you. So hopefully you're all ready. So this question, does discrimination have to be intentional? And I've given you 3 options here. We've got a yes, a no, and a don't know. So if you look back on your phones now, again, you should see this question pop up. You should be given the opportunity to answer. I'll just give you a few moments. I'm just watching to see. Here we've got 12 out of 17. As I said, if you don't know, you don't know. Just click don't know. Absolutely fine. Right. I'm now going to see where we are. 15 out of 18. That's not bad. Not bad. Right then. No. Everyone got it right. You know what? I'm really chuffed with that, because either you've listened to me previously talk about discrimination, or it just shows that you know that this is an important area. You've already got basic understanding about discrimination. You're not starting from scratch, which I think is brilliant. I mean, if you're here today as well, it shows that you are valuing expanding your knowledge, but your basics are so important. So yeah, so discrimination does not need to be intentional. And we have different types of discrimination that we're now going to go through, where I can illustrate to you that it's not about intention, it's about effect. So direct discrimination is our first category, and this is the most obvious one. This is the one where you treat someone less favourably because they either have a characteristic, they're perceived to have a characteristic, or they are associated with someone that has a protected characteristic. So, a good example of this is, I'm dismissing you because you're pregnant. That's a very obvious one. The problems we have with direct discrimination is that very rarely these things are written down. It all becomes a matter of evidence and proof. But other ways, as I said, it can be direct discrimination is there was a case a few years back of someone. It was a boy who was perceived to be gay. He wasn't gay, but his work colleagues perceived him that way and taunted him and treated him differently because they believed he was gay. That was still direct discrimination, even though he said, "I'm not, but you are treating me differently because of that characteristic." And then associated. So a good example of this is that if you have someone in your workforce who has caring responsibilities, say for a disabled child. So that child will have a protected characteristic if they've got a disability that falls within the Act, and you treat them differently because of that. Could be, we're not inviting so-and-so because they can't come, because they have to look after their child, or we don't want them there because they bring down the mood, because they're always talking about this. That would still be direct discrimination. Then we've got indirect discrimination. So this is coming back to our definitions of equality. We're treating everyone the same, but we might not actually be treating everyone equitably. So indirect discrimination is where you've got what we call a PCP, so provision, criterion, or practice, which is essentially in English a policy or a rule. You apply it to everyone because you're trying to be fair. We're treating everyone the same. However, certain people who have protected characteristics are actually put at disadvantage because of that. A good example of that is if you have a sickness absence policy that has triggers, and you have someone with a disability, you don't make adaptations for them. So it means that they may reach their trigger point sooner than others. And therefore they're actually at a disadvantage. So although you are fairly applying this to everyone, someone who has a disability who may need a little bit more time off because of that disability could end up being dismissed far quicker than someone that doesn't. So indirect discrimination is something that we always need to have at the back of our minds, particularly when we're writing our policies and procedures. Is this actually fair for everyone? And I said, look back at that picture. Like I said, I just think it's a brilliant picture about the equality and equity, is that actually our actions and what we perceive to be good things might not always benefit everyone. So harassment. Now, this is a key one that is going to, it's going to be the most common one that you'll come across when we're looking at banter and microaggressions. So harassment is essentially unwanted conduct. It's got to have the purpose, an effect of violating someone's dignity, creating an intimidating, hostile, degrading, humiliating atmosphere. When you start looking at comments and actions, chances are it is going to fall under harassment. And then we've got victimization, which we add on. And basically that is where someone maybe makes a complaint, they raise a grievance, or they might even bring a claim. Because one thing that an employee can do, they can bring a claim for discrimination while still working for you. So they don't have to have left your business, they don't have to have been dismissed, but they can sue you whilst working there. So if someone, say, did raise a grievance, raise a complaint, and suddenly they started to treat different, being treated differently, they're overlooked for promotion or pay rise, or they're not invited to certain events, they're not included, that could be victimization if the reason for that is because they have tried to raise an issue. So they're the types. Right then, let's move on to banter. So I'm covering banter because it does overlap with microaggressions. Banter, I would say, is probably a little bit more obvious. When you are looking at your workforce, you might be able to identify banter more easily than you can microaggressions. The most typical type of banter is obviously verbal. It's the day-to-day discussions that take place in work, which they're a laugh, it's all a bit of fun, but at what point do we draw a line and say this is no longer fun for everyone? This now is affecting people differently. And I've got some examples that have all been through the tribunal. So these are real cases that the tribunal have heard on banter. So there was recently a case about a black NHS midwife on her last day. Someone, I believe it may have been either a colleague or someone more senior to her, joked and said, "Oh, so-and-so's last day, everyone check your bags." There were a few other things said as well, and this was repeated, but the way that that was perceived by that employee was that, well, you think I'm a thief. You have generalized me. You think I'm, I'm going to leave. I'm going to take all your things. And the tribunal actually found that that was a step too far. And there was more to it. You need to look into the background, the context, the working relationship between these people. If you have never shared a joke with that person before and suddenly they think it's appropriate to say that to you, is that banter? Or has that gone too far? And in this case, the tribunal found that it had gone too far. Another one, Half Dead Dave, 69-year-old plumber. He won £25,000 for an age discrimination case because his managers, everyone at work, just referred to him as Half Dead Dave because he was older. So that was again a fairly obvious one. We've got cases such as being referred to as a dinosaur. Age discrimination again. Calling a lady in her 30s a good girl. Not always going to be a bad thing, but when they're in the late 30s, they've got their own kids, is that appropriate or is that actually a little bit demeaning? How are you saying that? Why are you saying that? Is it even necessary? And the judge actually made some comments about this because obviously good girl in itself is not insulting. It's not offensive. It all comes down to how and when it was said. And the judge here went on to say that language evolves over time. Words and phrases that might once have seemed harmless are now regarded as racial, homophobic, and sexist slurs. So we need to be mindful that what was once appropriate or what was deemed appropriate, we overlooked, may not be appropriate now. Same as the use of the word cheeky monkey came up in a case. And in this case, it was found to be racial harassment, but the judge was very clear that in other circumstances, this wouldn't be. This wouldn't be discrimination. This would just be innocent banter, innocent comment. Again, we're looking at why it's said. How did it make that person feel? So, I mean, there are cases as well. It's not that everything is going to be discrimination. So, for example, it was tested out about the use of the word dark horse. That was found not to be discrimination. The context wasn't right, but also it was just found that generally that phrase, "Oh, you're a dark horse," it's not necessarily insulting or doesn't come from a bad place. Same as I always it makes me smile, this case, although it shouldn't, because even if it's not discrimination, you still have to think about bullying, and you've got to think about, do you want those words being used in your workplace? Does it create a happy environment? But back in 2019, we had the Fat Ginger Pikey case, where an employee was repeatedly called Fat Ginger Pikey. He was also referred to as Fat Yoda and Salad Dodger. He was a gentleman from the traveller community. He had type 1 diabetes. However, the judge in this case found that that was not discrimination. He was an active participant in the banter culture, and he just jumped on this when things didn't quite go his way. But again, might not have been discrimination, but is that appropriate for your workplace? When you've got your new employees coming in, is that what you want them to hear? Is that going to make everyone feel inclusive? Another one of our keywords. Is everyone going to want to feel part of that culture if that's how your current employees act? So there's just some examples of banter. And as I said, I've covered it because it does overlap with microaggressions. So moving on now to microaggressions. I think obviously a lot of you will be asking, what is it? What is a microaggression? So these are statements, actions, incidences. They're more subtle. They are indirect normally. They are harder to prove, harder to spot. It's something though, it's like an undercurrent in your workplace. Some articles refer to it as a modern day discrimination just because of how subtle it is, yet it can be so damaging to your working environment if you allow these things to go on. So, I mean, just there's some examples. You speak excellent English. Where are you from? Or where are you really from? These things aren't generally said with malice, but sometimes said with ignorance. And I think a good key example of a microaggression, if a sentence has to start with, "I'm not being racist, but," chances are it's going to be racist. If you have to put a disclaimer on your sentences, should you really be saying it? So microaggressions, harder to spot, harder to manage, but just as detrimental to your workplace. So we'll do a bit more of a deep dive into that. But first of all, let's go back to a quiz. So I want you to have a little look now and see if you can maybe spot some examples of what you think may be microaggressions. So again, there's no right number of answers here. It's as many as you think are appropriate. So which of these are examples? So we've got, you speak really well. Where are you really from? Shortening a name because it's hard to pronounce. A woman constantly being interrupted in a meeting by a male colleague. Eye rolling when someone is talking. Or do we think all of the above could be microaggressions? So have a read of those again. You speak really well. Where are you really from?
Sorry, Lindsay, just very quickly,
Yep.
I just want to remind everyone, please don't forget to share your experiences, questions, anything that you want to say around banter, microaggressions, discrimination in the chat box. I've got a couple that are really good examples, and I will be talking about them sort of towards the end, particularly a comment that we've had around terminology. So we will be talking about that towards the end, but please don't forget to share your experiences or anything that you want to share with us.
Oh, thank you, Ellie. Right, I'll be all to go. I think people are a bit scared about this question. It is a bit more difficult because I bet you're all reading these going, well, it depends how it's said and when it's said and what's happening. But we're just talking about the potential. So let's have a look, see what you said. So the majority of you think actually all of the above. I'd say, you know, the answer with the least popular, you speak really well. But potentially, actually, all of these said in a specific way, in a specific setting, could be considered microaggressions. So to look at those a little bit further, oops, let me just go back one. So I think the one that caused the most difficulty is you speak so well. At what point would it be okay to say that to someone? So you actually, when you say, oh, you speak really well, that means that you've actually made an assumption that that person, for whatever reason, it could be based on their skin colour, their country of origin, it could be based on their education. You have made an assumption that you didn't expect them to be able to speak so well or to articulate so well. When Ellie delivers our equality and diversity training, she also covers unconscious bias. And unconscious bias is something actually that we all have. And it's something that we all need to be aware of. But when you look at someone, you've made a judgment in your head, and then you come out with that comment, it all sounds really innocent, but actually no, that you're basically insinuating that someone shouldn't have been able to do something that well because of your perceived impression of them. So here I've separated out into three. So we've got verbal, behavioural, environmental. Shows that actually microaggressions aren't always verbal, although we've got further subcategories, which again, if you join us for our equality and diversity training, Ellie will go into far more detail into what microaggressions are, but the subcategories are micro assaults, micro invalidations, and micro insults. So this is a much broader topic. So I'm only touching the surface on this. Behavioural. So again, giving someone a nickname without their permission because you're uncomfortable saying their full name. I'm pretty sure all of us at some point have been faced with a name where we've gone, oh, I don't know how to say that. And you don't mean to be offensive. You don't mean to be insulting. But actually, the right way to deal with that is say, can I just ask, how do you pronounce your name? Sometimes just giving it a go isn't appropriate because it could be offensive. Or shortening someone's name without their permission. Again, it borders on ignorant. And then you've got your environmental ones. So this is, you know, naming rooms and buildings after white men, obviously equal pay, but also creating an environment which doesn't accommodate for disabilities seen and unseen in a workplace. So again, these could be considered microaggressions, things that aren't obvious, but as I said, they make someone's life so much harder on a day-to-day basis. So how does banter and microaggressions and link with discrimination? How are these? How's this going to get you in trouble is effectively what we're asking here. So direct discrimination, we've obviously covered the topics on that one, but an example of a direct discrimination microaggression could be, oh, look at I like your hair. Can I touch your hair? Is that normal? Do we normally ask people if we can touch their hair? And what you tend to find is people who have got particularly afro hair get asked that a lot. Is that appropriate? That's something not many people ask to touch my hair. And I wash it regularly. Got washed this morning. No one's asked to touch it today. But yeah, you find that people who particularly have afro hair are asked, can I touch that? Well, no, you can't. It's not appropriate. Also, direct discrimination. Oh, Tim won't understand that technology because he's too old. Give it to one of the younger ones. Give that project to someone younger. Well, we've just made a really big assumption there that someone who is older isn't going to be good at technology. It might not have been said with malice, but what you've done is treated someone less favourably because of a protected characteristic. Then you've got your indirect discriminations again. So environmental factors, again, such as failing to adapt to workplace, can still be microaggressions that become indirect discrimination. And then a key one is obviously harassment. You constantly saying to someone or making comment, like I said, key one. If you have to start your sentence with "it's not racist, but," chances are it's going to be. You are going to say something that is about to offend someone. It could violate their dignity and also create that intimidating, hostile and degrading environment. But also things like eye rolling. If you are constantly disregarding someone, or there's an employee in your workplace who feels that every time they talk, either they're talked over or someone goes, "Oh, they're talking again." Yeah, that can all be harassment. Examples, I'm just thinking further examples to tell you about would be ones that I've seen more in the media about how often it's said to, say, a black woman, "Oh, you're really aggressive." Again, that's a microaggression. Would we say that to a white woman? Well, actually, what we're finding is that that is said to a black woman more than it would be to a white woman when they're trying to put forward an opinion, when they're trying to stick up for themselves, or they're trying to manage, just do their job. "Ooh, you're really aggressive." It's not appropriate. And then obviously victimization, because what we want to be doing and the ideal outcome today is that you go away, you look at your policies, your procedures, you look at how easy it is for someone to raise these issues, because we want these issues to be raised, because you want your workplace to be the nicest place it can be. But if someone does then follow your procedures, they do then raise a complaint, and then suddenly they're treated differently either by yourself but by other colleagues, then we could end up in a situation of victimization. So how you manage these situations is really important, because even if you as an employer are not condoning that and you've put everything in place, you could still be vicariously liable for allowing it to happen. So vicarious liability means that you are responsible for your employees' actions. So the impact then, why are we so worried? Well, high turnover of staff. People who experience microaggressions will feel lower job satisfaction. So I think one of the ones that I read earlier said it's like when you're going to work, it's like 1,000 little paper cuts every day. Nothing major, nothing concrete or bad is said. It's just on a day-to-day basis, you are made to feel bad. And obviously, if you're not enjoying going to work, lower job satisfaction. And then moving on to the next one, can affect productivity. Offensive speech, microaggressions, it's going to affect your workplace. People aren't happy. You're going to have higher levels of sickness. You're going to have issues where people are present but not actually doing what they're supposed to be doing. Then we've got the hostile working environment, which might undermine employee safety. So particularly, we see banter as an issue a lot in, for example, manufacturing, building sites. Particularly I've seen, don't know if you pass now, the big building structures, like I'm based in Sheffield and we've got lots of building work going off, and outside building all these big building sites now, there's big signs saying we don't tolerate we don't tolerate comments. They give you numbers that you can phone. It's just that traditional wolf whistling harassment. And I think building sites particularly, I've thought, oh God, we really need to clamp down on this because it's not a nice place to be. But again, also, like I said, the safety aspect of it as well. If people are distracted from doing their proper job because of things that are happening or being said, then it's not productive all the way around. People who experience microaggressions are at risk of mental and physical health issues, which can lead to absenteeism. So actually, I believe there's quite a big overlap with this as well with mental health. We're not covering mental health today, but it is a very relevant area. Again, someone who's unhappy at work, will be off more. Recently, I was having quite an in-depth discussion with someone about men's mental health and the use of terms such as "man up," or "crying like a girl," is being a bit of a pansy or a fairy about it. All these things not appropriate, and they reflect old-fashioned attitudes, which we just don't tolerate anymore. Things have changed. You might be in denial. You might be like, "Well, that didn't happen in my day." Well, it's happening now. If you deny that, or in your opinion, just because you think it shouldn't be happening or it shouldn't be an issue, doesn't mean that it is not. So there's lots of ways microaggressions, banter is going to affect your workplace as well as your culture. And what you'll find is that particularly younger generations coming in now who are more educated on all these issues, they're going to be less tolerant. We've all had, pretty much every sector has been hit by a recruitment crisis over the last few years. And you're just going to find people won't stay. They want to work for companies that are forward thinking, that are addressing these issues, that are not stuck back in old mindsets, tolerating behaviours that are now no longer acceptable. They're going to move on. You're not going to attract your talent, and you're definitely not going to keep it. And as the bottom one says, you're going to land in a tribunal. So how are we going to stop this from happening? What can we do? So firstly, this is not a woke issue or phase to pander to the snowflakes. There, I've used 3 examples of microaggressions that probably have already been used in your workplace at one point or another. The woke generation, we keep seeing that in the media. Oh, it's another phase, it'll pass. It's not going to pass. And yeah, now we have a generation of snowflakes that aren't robust and just are constantly complaining and whinging. Well, this generation of snowflakes, unfortunately, are a big part of your workforce. And by alienating them, creating that environment where they're not valued, they're not going to stay. So we either have to accept this, or you're going to watch your business start to suffer. Key starting point though, make sure your policies are up to date. Have you looked at them recently? Do they address all the issues? So have you got actually a separate bullying and harassment policy? I saw an equality and diversity policy the other day that didn't even list all the 9 characteristics. We were still going back to the Disability Discrimination Act. I'm like, well, that's not up to date. That's no good. And it's certainly no good if you're just going to bury it in a filing cabinet and no one knows where it is. It should be or should form a key part of your induction process. So staff coming on board should know what your policies are. They should know where to find it. But also they should be given that confidence that you are going to enforce them. So further down it says you deal with complaints consistently and fairly. People want to know that they're going to be heard if they complain and not victimized. Because again, victimization could land you as another claim. But if people are afraid to raise their head above the parapet, then you're never going to move your business forward. Evaluating culture. So how do you go about finding issues in your workplace? How do you communicate with your staff? And I think it's really important that you have ways in which you can constantly monitor your culture, what's happening at ground level, particularly if you are a director of your business and you don't work in the day-to-day business. How do you know what is actually happening between your staff members? Key ways you can do this: set up staff councils. If you're particularly a bigger employer, you might have staff councils whereby you've got representatives who bring issues to a council setting. You can send out anonymous questionnaires, satisfaction questionnaires. Do you dare ask how happy your employees are? Lots of employers will bury their head in the sand going, I don't think I want to know. Well, if you're burying your head in the sand, you're probably not going to be able to pick up on the issues. And you are going to have other things happening, such as high turnover, more grievances, more absences. Regular one-to-ones with staff, and regular one-to-ones are important, not only so that your managers can touch base with employees, but also that line managers are trained up to pick up and address issues in these one-to-ones. They've got to be meaningful. They've got to have a purpose. And another, what I would term an old-fashioned view, is that work's work, home's home. You shouldn't bring your home life into work. Well, again, we've moved on a bit now. We work from home. Our lives are very intertwined with our home life. And if you believe that from 9 to 5, your employee should not have one thought about their personal circumstances at home, then you're being very naive. Because what you'll find is that what happens at home will affect work. It will affect, again, absences, presenteeism, if they're worried about things that are happening. And therefore, it is your job as your employee to start picking up on those issues and seeing if you can minimise the impact. If someone feels supported at work, it can become a bit of a safe place for them, where they flourish and they're productive because they know that they don't have to worry about those issues at home. Having regular team meetings as well, I think, is really important. Making sure everyone's bonded. So not just team meetings, but away days, activities, socials. We want everyone to be friends, ideally, but they're not always going to be. But more importantly, we want people to have respect for each other. So team meetings are a good way that you can bring everyone together and you can recognise everyone in their professional capacity as well. And then setting an example from the top down. So if your directors, your managers share those views about the woke generation, the snowflakes, if they believe that work's work, home's home, they refuse to attend training, they don't believe in microaggressions, banter's just a bit of a laugh, that's exactly what's going to feed down to your workforce. But also, this is where, as HR, you may want to report back to them and say, well, if you ignore all these issues and you don't set the right example, you will end up in a tribunal, because that's the end. That's the worst case of what's going to happen. And if you've listened to me talk before, tribunals aren't cheap. If you're defending a claim, you could be maybe 10 to 20 grand into legal fees to defend. If you're found to be in the wrong, we're looking at awards ranging anything from £1,000 up to 40 odd £1,000, but even more. They're just the general brackets. A tribunal has the discretion to make awards that far exceed your 40 odd thousand, which is the top of the top bracket. Your average discrimination case is generally worth probably between 10 and 20,000. So it's actually worth people giving it a go. If you give your employees room, if you upset them, then you give them room and excuses, it's free for them to bring a claim just to have a go at this, because there could be a lot of money in it for them if they're right. Don't let them be right. Make sure your policies are up to date. Make sure that you're evaluating your culture. You're dealing with everyone fairly, consistently, but also equitably. New word that we're dealing with today. And then, to me, the key weapon that you have in your armory is training. Everyone, some of these topics that we've discussed today are relatively new, but as I said, they're not going to go away. And if your directors, your managers, your line managers are all trained up on these issues, then they become your army to make sure that you are not vulnerable to claims. And then you feed that down. So if everyone's singing from the same page, then ideally, the ideal solution is you will have a harmonious workforce. And this is where I want to pass to Ellie, because obviously I've talked to you a lot, I've skimmed over lots of things, and but what I want Ellie to do today is just to tell you a little bit more about how training can help your business, but also what else it's going to cover beyond what I've said today. So if I will pass you now over to Ellie, let me just give you the slides, Ellie, as well.
It's all right, Lindsay, you can just flick the slide.
Might have to, because
Yeah.
there's a few Ellies on.
No, it's okay. You can
I
just flip.
I'm just not an early hand.
No, you can
Um,
flip. You can flip the slide. That's okay.
fair enough. Right. Go
Fabulous.
ahead, Ellie.
So obviously you've got everyone's put quite a few comments into the chat box, which I'm going to go through with you in just a moment. In relation to some of the comments that you've said, some of the examples that you've given, but also something that's really key that I think Claire and Cherry have both picked up on is the use of terminology. So when we're looking at sort of further training, when we're looking at the importance of understanding what microaggressions are, particularly microaggressions, as Lindsay said, when you break it down into the 3 different areas, so micro assaults, micro insults, and micro invalidations, it's not just comments, it's actions as well. And it is very much the way that we behave, the environmental settings that we find ourselves in. They have significant impacts on the way that others feel and how they are treated at work. Now, the training that we deliver on equality, diversity, and unconscious bias goes into a lot of that detail. So it covers your basic around discrimination and what equality, diversity, inclusion, and equity is. It covers all of that, but then it goes on to look at what unconscious bias is. What is it? You know, every single person on this training course here today, and probably every single person that you spoke to, will have at some point in their working life or in their social life had unconscious bias thoughts or made a decision because of the way that their brain has irrationally made them feel or irrationally made them think. So it's really important to understand that what that is. And unconscious bias isn't just linked to the 9 protected characteristics that Lindsay went through earlier. It's linked to a lot more, particularly around your accent, sort of where you are living at that moment in time. So, you know, your socioeconomic class, you know, it is linked to a lot of that, your job title, your workplace. So we'd look at all of that in our extensive training course. We then go on to a lot of information around microaggressions, but more importantly, the use of terminology and also looking at what words have been reclaimed by society, because there are certain words that have been reclaimed. And whilst you look at it and on the face of it, you'd think, surely not, we can't say that word anymore. It's actually acceptable because it's thought of as a reclaimed saying, as a reclaimed word. So that's sort of the stuff that we'd cover in our extensive course. Now, obviously, the extensive course and the more bespoke training does come with an additional cost, and it does have a cost attached to it, unlike our free training sessions that we provide through this forum. Having said that, we have a lot of funding opportunities now available for individuals and for businesses that we can support you with, as we have become a Skills Bank approved training provider. So I have only gone through with you there what our equality and diversity training course would cover, as that's what you all want to know, because that's what we've covered today. We do a lot more bespoke training courses around HR, line management training, people skills, recruitment practices, but you only really need to know about sort of our equality and diversity today. So here is a list of our upcoming training courses, workshops, and events. So the one that you'll see there is on the 14th of November. We've got our equality, diversity, and unconscious bias training course. Now, it says there that it's 1 day. At this moment in time, we have availability to make it a full day course, but we've shortened the times because of the delegates that we've currently got attending that course. So the current delegates would prefer a half day rather than a full day. We are flexible. We can do whatever the individual needs, and it's not that we just put on a course that only suits one. We try and incorporate it and suit everybody. Now, we do have a 50% funding contribution available towards that course. So the cost of the course for the full day is £250 plus VAT, and you'd get a 50% discount on that through Skills Bank. Obviously, if we do decide to only run it for the half day, the cost will be reduced, and I can go through that with you in a separate discussion to this training, because I don't want to go through the cost of it now. But we do have our additional training there for you. So we're doing a wellbeing in the workplace webinar we're doing in conjunction with DG Legal, and that's running on the 31st of October. And that does go through, what do you do? Do you need a wellbeing policy in the workplace? How do you support employees? And we've also got our other extensive training courses on there. So what I want to do now is I want to go through what sort of you've discussed with us. Obviously, we've got our next HR exchange on there as well with the recruitment side, and also our Bhayani social, which you'll all be given details of, so don't worry about that. So looking at our experience and sharing what you said, because I think this is probably what you all want to get onto. You don't necessarily want to hear me talk about all the events that we've got going on. So one thing that was raised was a negative view of sanitary bins due to cost, saying it only happens once a month, so why do we need to have these sanitary bins in females' toilets? Firstly, only females are going to see them for a start, really, unless obviously you've got them in the disabled toilet, so it should be no difference, no consideration for anybody else. But I appreciate it is a cost to the organisation. It's not just once a month because you probably employ multiple individuals, so each person could be on a different cycle at different times of the month, and that's something that needs to be put across and understood. We've seen this before where everybody says, "Oh, why do we need to have them? I'm not impacted." Particularly, male colleagues would say something like that. Well, it doesn't impact me, so I don't feel the need to have these sanitary bins. I don't feel the need to pay for them or to have the cost to our organisations. They are a necessity. Obviously, if they're not provided and you feel that that's degrading or comments are made that are humiliating, then that is a comment. It is a form of banter that could potentially consider being harassment under the Equality Act in connection to your sex. So that's the comment that you would need to put back to your employer on that one. Something that I think has been brought up twice, which I think is really important, is management style. The way that information is delivered, the way that you are given an instruction, and how you are spoken to can massively negatively affect your feelings, the way that you share your experiences, the way that you behave at work. Not only that, sort of the morale in the place of work. So, and I think, Bill, you've just asked a question around sort of what's the best way to deal with situations when it comes to microaggressions? How do we tackle these situations? How do we tackle discrimination or harassment in the place of work? And that does link into management style to a certain extent. Obviously, one of the biggest things when we're looking at how we tackle this is awareness. It's making everybody aware of what their rights are, but also what's right and what's wrong. How should you address these situations? What people skills, what soft skills do you need to have in order to manage your staff effectively? Those that are speaking, those individuals who perhaps are managing and speaking in a really negative way, perhaps it's because they don't understand the impact of their actions and the impact of their conversations. So it's just about having a conversation with them, talking to them about that, and helping them to understand. When you're looking at dealing with complaints or issues that are raised with discrimination, and Lindsay, you may be able to add to this, but my best piece of advice and the best course of action with that is to try and deal with it informally and nip it in the bud as soon as you become aware of the issue. Don't let it fester. I often say, don't let it turn into that mouldy piece of bread that you've got stuck in the cupboard. Absolutely deal with it as soon as you possibly know, because if you leave it and if you let it grow, mold, using the bread acronym to put everybody and put it into perspective, if you let it grow, if you let it get worse, then ultimately you'll have a much bigger case on your hand and you'll have a much bigger issue because there will be grievances raised. You probably will end up with a tribunal claim. And sometimes, when we look at the unconscious bias and the microaggressions, sometimes people genuinely don't mean to cause offence with the comments that they've said. And I think it was yourself, Cherry, that's just brought it up just a second ago. A lot of this is generational. So when we look at the way that generations have changed and when we look at what happened and what was acceptable perhaps 15, 20 years ago, it's not the same now. Education's changed, training on the subject has changed, the law has changed. The Equality Act only came in 2010. So pre-2010, we didn't have all these characteristics laid out in the same way that we do now in an Equality Act. So absolutely, generations have a huge impact on the way that situations are addressed, the way that microaggressions come to light in the place of work. So it is simply about just having open, honest, transparent discussions with members of staff And if something does happen in the place of work, and if you have got an issue, it's sitting down with the individuals involved, trying to mediate and to try and settle the situation down. But, dealing with it through your grievance policies, for example, or if somebody has said something that's directly discriminatory, you would need to discipline them for that, because they need to know that action such as that should not be left, left unheard, left unsaid. You need to action it and you need to deal with it. Lindsay, I don't know if you have any different
Yeah, no,
anything to add to
I
that.
just completely agree with you. From my experience, employees just want to be heard. They want to be taken seriously. They want to know that their whatever their experiences are sharing, what problems are being sharing, are going to be dealt with or at least acknowledged. And it's not just going to be covered up. And you find that if you can take the time to understand someone's position, and you show empathy and you say, yeah, it wasn't okay, and we are going to deal with that, more often than not, that will conclude that issue, because people just want to feel that their concerns have been validated and they're not being ignored. You tend to find that the situations that escalate are when relationships between employee management, employee and company have deteriorated, and it gets worse, it gets more hostile, and then it's almost giving them any excuse then to take a claim to the tribunal. But if you can, and like I said, nip it in the bud, to use what a phrase that Ellie's just used, it does solve a lot of problems quite early on.
Yeah, no, definitely. So just a couple more examples, and one I am saving one right to the very end, just because I think we can use a lot more examples surrounding that. But Claire, you've discussed the sort of service that you provide to other individuals. So obviously, you work with individuals who are coming into this country from Ukraine, and you've got individuals who are perhaps changing their name, or they're not letting them use their original birth name because other individuals can't pronounce it. And that's been made accepted, that actually, yeah, maybe you should change your name and you should have a different name to what you originally called, so it's easier for us. I absolutely agree with you that that shouldn't be the case. And potentially making somebody feel humiliated or degraded or unable to use their original names absolutely would be an act of harassment, or potentially, somebody might think, oh, well, we'll help them out. We'll do it for them so that they're not embarrassed trying to explain or spell their name to somebody else. I would say that's potentially an act of, a microaggression, because somebody thinks it's so indirect and so subtle because they're trying to support them. But actually, not only is it potentially a micro insult that you're hurting them, it's a micro invalidation because that's something that they genuinely believe and you're making them change that. So absolutely, that was a really good example. Something else that was picked up was a case that somebody had where, unfortunately, individual had suffered a life-changing accident, where they had mobility issues as a result of the accident, and their place of work, instead of just moving the location of their desk from a couple of floors up to the ground floor, said, sorry, only managers work on the ground floor, and therefore he could no longer work there. That is a prime example of failing to make a reasonable adjustment for somebody who potentially has a disability. That is a prime example, and something so simple as to just moving them from the third floor to the ground floor. So, it doesn't harm the organisation necessarily. It's just making that adjustment to ensure that we are being inclusive and open to somebody who potentially has a disability. Now, the last one that I just want to talk to you about is terminology. And I think somebody's used the example where female engineer has gone into a very male dominant industry, and words such as manhole cover are still being used. Now, we had a very similar experience of this here ourselves at Bhayani Law. So we went into a meeting, there was 3 women sat around a table with one gentleman who did health and safety, and he asked us if we'd like to sign a gentleman agreement. At which point we turned around and said, what's a gentleman agreement? There's a room of equal individuals in the room. There's some men, some women. What is this? And You're absolutely right. It's historic terminology that is still being used now. Lindsay used the example of man flu earlier on today. I've heard people say, oh, they're just having a senior moment, or oh, she's just having another one of those hot flushes. She'll get over it. Words and comments such as that are both harassment, but also microaggressions. They are micro insults and assaults to you verbally as an individual without knowing. I heard the other day that somebody had said, if it's not white, it's not right. Now, they felt that they could link that to something else. They felt they could link it to a cup of tea or a piece of paper. But ultimately, the wider context of that comment that was said had such damaging impacts on other individuals who were in a surrounding environment that could be classed as discrimination or a microaggression. It's so important when we're thinking about equality and diversity, unconscious bias. It's not just the comments that we say directly to somebody else, it's about understanding and learning who you're addressing. So being very aware of your audience. I think that's one of the biggest tips to take away from any training that you have on equality and diversity. It's not, and please don't think that we've done a big session on banter, or Lindsay's gone through banter to make you think, oh my gosh, I'm going to go back to the office, I'm going to sit in silence, I'm never going to talk to anybody ever again, because that's not the purpose of training. That's not the purpose of helping you to understand and learn more about the topic and the subject. It's more just about knowing your surroundings, knowing who sat next to you. If you think that person would not feel comfortable or would not find it appropriate if I said this, just don't say it. Just don't say it. That's it. It's quite simple. You just don't say it. You know, it's not the hardest thing to understand at times, but you know, there's other things around professional boundaries, and I think Lindsay touched upon that in terms of setting an example from the top down. Professional boundaries is so important. A conversation that you might have as a tight-knit management team where you can have banter, you can have a laugh and a joke. Employees may not find that funny. Individuals who weren't part of that conversation or who haven't been part of the organisation for years are not going to find that banter. They might find that quite offensive and inappropriate. So it's just about knowing your audience and setting boundaries. They were sort of the examples that we did have, Lindsay. And like I said, a lot of it was around the correct use of terminology and sort of, you know, what could happen and how that's inappropriate. And a lot of that stuff, like I said, is covered on our more intense and bespoke equality and diversity course. And we do look at what words have been reclaimed, but also what used to be okay 10 to 15 years ago and what is not okay anymore. And these new words that have been created, I mean, Lindsay used the example of the word snowflake. I hadn't heard of that word 5 years ago. I didn't even know it existed. It's new words that are being created, which are also linking very strongly into discriminatory behaviour, microaggressions that we need to be aware of.
Excellent. Yeah, and it's not all doom and gloom, as Ellie's saying. It's not about, oh, you can't say all this. It's that our training courses that as we want to be proactive, we want to give you skills and tips to be able to go back into your workforce and to share the message positively. So it's not just a rule of this is what you can't do now. It's looking at this is how we're going to act going forward. This is our culture. Our culture is something to be proud of, and that is something you will gain knowledge about as part of the training. Right, and so that kind of brings us to things. So one thing I'd like you to do, you don't have to share it with us if you don't want to, but have a think about one thing you're going to do differently. Are you going to attend a training course? Are you going to maybe start to look at rearranging all those one-to-ones that have been thrown out the window because everyone's too busy? Are you going to do a staff survey? Are you going to dare to ask staff if they're happy? Yeah, have a little think about all these things that you can do now to maybe start addressing this. You're not going to change everything overnight, but little by little, you can maybe start to really make a difference to your workplace. And then finally, we've got time for questions. So yeah, we put these in for 2 hours, but at the moment, yeah, we're really looking for like an hour and a half because we don't want to take up too much of your time. But it does mean we've got plenty of time for questions. If anyone wants to ask anything, if you want to put anything in the chat box, or you want to unmute yourself and ask a question, we're happy to take them. Either everyone's scrambling to find the unmute button, or they're thinking, "Oh, you've talked at us for too long now." Whilst you're looking, feel free, as I said, to yeah, to unmute just whilst I. Oh, Cherry.
I'll be brave. Thanks, Lindsay and Ellie, for a really great session. That was really, really interesting. Can I just ask a question about skills banks? I'm afraid it's something that I don't really know anything about. What is the eligibility criteria in order to tap into that for training?
Yeah, of course. So Skills Bank is the South Yorkshire Combined Authority. So it's called SIMCA for short. That's what the sort of acronym is. It's accessible to businesses, organisations based in the South Yorkshire area. It doesn't expand outside of South Yorkshire at this moment in time. I understand they are putting programmes on for different areas across the region, but at this moment in time, it is purely based in South Yorkshire. Now, the criteria is generally based on three elements. So the first one is they're looking for businesses or organisations that are on a growth journey, or somebody who is trying to improve the business by upskilling and training their staff. Now, it doesn't have to be growth from a profitability point of view, which is what everybody gets wrong. It just has to be growth of some form. So whether you're trying to grow your presence across the community by being more diverse, or by having equality, diversity, inclusion policies, procedures, or training to make yourself more accessible to different tenders, or to make yourself accessible to different client bases. So it's around business growth. The other two elements they do look at is sustainability and your social corporate responsibility. So what they are really keen on, although this is something that potentially will change, is they're really keen on businesses who are looking to move towards a net zero movement, is what I've been told. So those that are looking to reduce sort of carbon emissions, those that are looking to have more sustainable, friendly policies, procedures, and products that they produce. So that's what they're looking for at the moment. And then, like I said, your corporate social responsibility. But ultimately, you know, what SIMCA are there for is they're wanting to make sure that the training that you're having and the funding that they want to provide you with is helping you give something back to the community. The funding contribution is anywhere between 40 to 60% of the total cost of funding. So you could receive a funding contribution of anywhere between 40 to 60% of the cost. I'll be completely honest with you, I've never seen any organisation get over 50%. So you're generally looking between sort of the 35 to 50 mark, because they do. So although their website says anything from 40 and above, if they really want to support you, they will give you something, but it'll be less than 40, so it'll be 35 and above. Hopefully that's answered your question.
That's really helpful. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, just while you're talking, I've just put a bit of information up there about our water site. So if you are not one of our water site clients, then please get in touch and we can have a chat with you about how we can help support your business with all your HR needs and your employee management.
I suppose the only thing I would say on that as well, Lindsay, is when we've talked about training quite a bit today, and we have obviously we've talked about training because that's one of the most important things. For those of you that don't know what our watertight service does, if I'm being honest, that is like one-to-one coaching for members of staff. So if you've got anybody new to management, or if you've got anybody new to HR, that sometimes is the best way to upskill, because they're getting one-to-one direct contact with one of our trained advisors who are all skilled. And it really does help bring on a lot of, particularly more junior members of staff who have never done management or HR before. It really does help them build their knowledge.
Yeah, on our standard package upwards, it's unlimited advice. You can pick up the phone to us every day if you want to, and we'll always give you straightforward, sensible advice that you can follow. Yeah, we never speak jargon to you. So yeah, we've spotted lots of businesses and we received lots of amazing feedback. So yes, so bringing us on to our feedback thing, we're always incredibly grateful for a review. So if you do have time, please pop onto Google, Trustpilot, review solicitors, anyway where you want to say anything nice to us. But also, it's important for us to receive that feedback on the forums as well, because we want to understand what you think we should be doing differently, what you'd like us to continue to do. New topics, we're always trying to find new things to make sure that we're on the ball with everything, but also you're getting the most out of these sessions. So please do fill in the feedback forms as well. Join our newsletter. There's a QR code there, but also you can just pop onto our website, put your details in, and you'll receive our our newsletter, which contains legal updates, HR updates, lots of interesting bits of information. So you never fall behind on the latest news. And that's it. So thank you very much for attending. You'll see a list of different ways that you can contact us. Please feel free to pick up the phone if there's anything you want to ask us. We always say I think people are scared of solicitors. They think that we just charge for everything. No, pick up the phone. Talk to us. We'll be able to give you, it might be that we'll be able to answer your question there and then, or we can just discuss ways that we can support you. So as you can see, we're a friendly bunch. But yeah, again, thank you everyone for attending. As just to repeat again, if you do want a copy of the slides, please fill in the feedback form. And also a copy of this recording will be available on our website over the next few days. So thank you again, everyone, for coming. And yeah, we will see you all again soon. I'm now going to close the session.